High-speed rail in the US has always been a popular topic of discussion, especially in the 21st century. The most common international definitions of high-speed rail are trains that exceed 155 miles per hour on newly built lines and 124 miles per hour on upgraded lines. As of now, the only service meeting these criteria in the US is the Amtrak Acela, and just barely. It tops out at 150 miles per hour, but only on a 50-mile stretch. Otherwise, the Acela's average speed across its 457-mile route is 70 miles per hour. Multiple rail services in the US travel at speeds between 90 to 125 miles per hour. However, these are technically classified as higher speed rail. In May 2023, Amtrak officially began running trains at up to 110 miles per hour on the corridor between Chicago and St. Louis. Now, this may seem silly to those coming from countries with actual high-speed rail networks, but as someone who grew up in central Illinois watching the Illinois High-Speed Rail Project with great interest, it was sort of a dream come true being able to travel on a train going 100 plus miles per hour right here in Illinois. So that's what we're doing today, riding Amtrak's Lincoln Service on the 2 hours between Chicago and Bloomington-Normal. Good morning from the stunning Great Hall of Chicago's Union Station. It's just after 6 a.m., so I've got quite some time before boarding my 7:15 train. Now, from the moment I entered the Great Hall, it seemed really empty to me, and that's because a lot of the waiting benches that I would have been walking by right now have been removed, and I don't know if that has anything to do with all of the renovations currently going on at Union Station. This morning, I'm on the 7:15 Lincoln Service 301, the fastest southbound train currently running between Chicago and St. Louis, but more on that later. I spent my free time getting some breakfast in the food court until boarding was called. When I reached the Amtrak gate area, I noticed another massive change from the last time I was here. You might have also noticed this, but all of the seats that used to be in the waiting area have been removed, and it appears that you're only allowed into this area if you're lining up to board your train. Another change I noticed was the introduction of these informational displays showing which train is boarding, which is a nice addition. Boarding started 25 minutes before departure time, and it was a pretty cool sight walking out to my train and seeing nothing but Amtrak's newer generation rolling stock lined up along the platforms. You can see a bunch of the new Venture coaches and an SC-44 Charger locomotive that would operate the 815 Saluki Train 391, which I would have taken if I was going directly back to Champaign. Amtrak's Lincoln Service was one of the first trains to introduce the new Siemens Venture cars, which will eventually become commonplace across all Midwestern services. For now, only the coach class cars are in active service. Some business class cars have made it into active service, but they're for some reason being used as extra coach seats. Until the new Venture business and cafe cars enter service, older Amfleet and Horizon cars are being used to provide the cafe and business class amenities. Our train today has a mix of old and new equipment. One Amfleet cafe/business car, 2 Horizon coach cars, 1 new Venture coach car, and 1 Venture business class car being used as coach. I was one of the first few passengers on board and got a seat in one of the Horizons. These cars were built around 1988 and for years have been the mainstay across Amtrak's Midwestern services. It's been a while since I last rode in one of these, so I was glad to somewhat relive old memories. Eventually, as more Venture cars arrive, the Horizons and Amfleets will be replaced, which is a shame because these older cars have far thicker and comfier seats than the new Venture cars. The seats in these Horizon cars were recently refurbished, receiving new leather upholstery, which in my opinion is slightly worse than the old fabric seats, but still comfy nonetheless. The seats recline pretty far back and the button is right above the armrest. Large tray tables are available at every coach seat and you can extend them as well. However, the design of the table mechanism is honestly quite horrible because, as you can see, the table legs jut right into my knees, so you really have to be careful not to knock anything over. Moving on, there's a nice little seat pocket and decent leg space. Unfortunately, there are no footrests like I've become used to on the Superliners, but with this much space, you can't really complain. Each pair of coach seats comes with a pair of power sockets, but the main drawback here is that whoever's in the aisle seat would have to reach over you if they wanted to plug something in. Or we could all just be helpful seatmates, which is not a bad idea either. Finally, reading lights are present above the seats, which is helpful for nighttime journeys. Amtrak's corridor from Chicago to St. Louis uses the same trackage as Metra's Heritage Corridor service from Union Station to Joliet. The Heritage Corridor is Metra's least used service, and it's basically a joke. It runs only 3 times per day in each direction, that too on weekdays only. Now, what's interesting about this train is that it's being pushed by Metra's Milwaukee Road Heritage Livery MP36 number 405. Which I never expected to see operating a train outside the Milwaukee District North and West lines. Now, as I said earlier, Train 301 is supposed to be the fastest southbound service between Chicago and St. Louis, and it is. I'll explain that in a bit. Unfortunately, Amtrak is Amtrak, and no matter the schedule, Amtrak trains more often than not find themselves yielding to freight traffic. As we sat waiting, I decided to walk up to the cafe located at the front of the train. This Amfleet cafe car is half business class, half cafe space, with bike racks on one side, which I've never seen before. Anyway, $3.25 later, I was back at my seat enjoying this pretzel as we continued waiting for this freight train to clear, which had now stopped. After 20 minutes of waiting, we finally proceeded across the diamond, pushing further south. So now let's talk trains a little bit more. There are 9 station stops on the corridor between Chicago and St. Louis, with 10 trains running on this line every day, 5 in each direction. However, only 4 trains, or 2 in each direction, actually stop at all 9 stations. 5 other trains do not stop in Dwight and Carlinville, and only 1 southbound train, number 301, which is our train today, skips all but 4 stations along the way. This is exactly why 301 is the fastest train between Chicago and St. Louis. Now, excluding freight train interference, this train is scheduled to complete the 284-mile journey between Chicago and St. Louis in just 4 hours and 46 minutes, when all other trains take a little over 5 hours. Right now, we're expressing through Summit, Illinois, which is normally the first stop after Chicago or the last stop before Chicago. This is the only train that does not stop in Summit, instead expressing straight through to Joliet.
We are now departing. Joliet. Next stop, Bloomington.
The train starts to pick up speed after departing Joliet, although right now we're going noticeably slow as we pass through Dwight, which is another station that this train expresses by. It was actually this stretch of track between Dwight and Pontiac, another station that we end up skipping, that was the first segment cleared for 110 mph revenue service in 2012. The rest of the line took a while to receive upgrades, as it was only in 2021 when the maximum speed was increased to 90 mph on the majority of the route between Joliet and Alton. As of May 3, 2023, the limit was finally increased to 110 mph between Joliet and Alton, and what a cool feeling it was being able to check my phone and see us zipping through the Illinois countryside at over 100 mph. The Chicago-St. Louis corridor directly parallels Interstate 55 for a large chunk of the route, at least until Springfield, when the two get some distance. The tracks also parallel the historic Route 66, the roadway you see directly in front. Route 66 was established in 1926 as one of the original highways in the U.S. numbered highway system and has been recognized many times in popular culture. I fell asleep for most of the ride, waking up right as we were approaching Bloomington. Now, even though Amtrak's higher speed service on the Chicago-St. Louis corridor is far behind other inner-city rail corridors elsewhere in the world, in my opinion, it's definitely a breath of fresh air for inner-city rail travel both in the Midwest and the U.S. as a whole.
Guys, once again, come to the door, you see Amtrak personnel. Watch your step, have a great day. This is Bloomington-Normal.
Now yes, it'd be really nice to see faster trains on both this line and other Amtrak routes, but as we've come to see in the US, getting proper high-speed rail projects funded and executed is a massive challenge, and that's an understatement. But for what we have now, Amtrak's current service is fine, and having paid $18 for a refundable coach fare, I was more than satisfied with the experience. And so, as we arrive at the second busiest Amtrak station in Illinois, I'd like to thank you all for watching. Until I see you next time, take care, stay safe, and have a good one.